Today's episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm with over 20 years of experience.
Greenman Open is a European long-term investment fund, or LTIF. It's focused on grocery-anchored retail real estate. These are the kinds of properties that some investors believe remain essential even in uncertain markets. People still need to buy food. That's what they say makes this sector more resilient and more stable over the long term.
Unlike many alternative investment funds that are only available to professionals, Greenman Open is open to a wide range of investors with lower minimum investments and a highly regulated structure.
Just remember, all investments carry risk. Values can go up or down, and past performance isn't a reliable guide to future returns. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but you should always speak to a financial advisor before investing. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.com.
Hello and welcome to our presidential election edition of Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
Okay, let me just explain a few technicalities on this. So if you're a subscriber, you have the opportunity to listen to this before the polls close. If you're not a subscriber, well, the result might be known at this stage by the time you get to listen to it. We're having to record this, making, I suppose, the expectation that Catherine Connolly has won the presidency. Judging on all the opinion polls, you can't really see it happening any other way. So we've lots to talk about the political implications, particularly for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, as a result of the humiliation that we're expecting in this presidential election outcome. But I want to start on something slightly different, Ivan, which I haven't prepared you for. We're recording this just after 9 o'clock on Friday morning. I didn't go to vote on my way down here this morning, and I'm not sure I am going to go and vote today. And I have, since I turned 18, I have voted in every local, European, general, presidential election. And this is the first time where I'm thinking of not voting. And if I do go and vote, like I am so unenthused by the three candidates, and I say three deliberately because Gavin is on the thing. And I'm sort of torn as well because my youngest fella, it's his first opportunity to vote. And I feel I've done with my other kids. I've gone with them on their first occasion voting. We go in together. And my eldest daughter, Andy, is sort of giving out to me saying, well, she'll bring Harry along if need be, to make sure that somebody goes with him for the first vote if I'm not going to do it. And I might, out of guilt, change my mind at some stage before polls close tonight, and I might rock in and I might do something. I'm not sure if I go down, maybe I'll spoil my vote. And I just, and you're looking at me horrified for saying that. But there was an Irish Times opinion poll last week which said 49% of those polled felt that the candidates did not represent them. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, I've interviewed the two main candidates and they're like, how can I vote for either of them?
So, the first thing I'd say is you're not alone. I think half the electorate are feeling that way. And they're feeling that way after consideration. It's not that they're in a bad mood or they're upset about it.
They just couldn't be arsed.
Yeah, or they're actually consciously, deliberately saying, my considered opinion is, I want to express my dissatisfaction with this choice. I want to express my dissatisfaction with this whole election. And basically, I think that is going to result in the historic moment that this will be the lowest turnout in the history of any plebiscite in the history of the state. And just to put figures on it, my sense of this is, because we talk in percentage terms with all the polls. So on paper, there's 3.6 million people on the register. They got an extra 61,000 people on the register. Art O'Leary's efforts. And he didn't have a bucket in Grafton Street yesterday, but I thought, talk about King Canute trying to, given your view, his idea of trying to get a high turnout, I thought it was like King Canute trying to push back the tide. But basically, my sense of the arithmetic is, if there's a third of the people go vote, which would be a historic low, 40% is as low as it's ever gone before, always in the 40s.
It's like 44% in 2018, apparently.
Yeah, 43.6 to be exact. But basically, the stories in general elections are usually nearer to 60 than 55. But basically, and sorry, all trends are showing over the decades that voting turnout has gone down. And that's maybe due to the fact that the people can get on the register, but they can't get off it. So I think the turnout will be somewhere around 1.2 million. I think that between spoiled votes, which were 18,000 in the last two presidential elections, will be nearer to 80 for the reasons you expressed. And I think if you take Jim Gavin plus spoiled votes, you're talking about 1 million votes for the two last candidates. And some of Jim's will be non-transferable as well. So my sense of it is, of the 1 million votes, something like Connolly to win by 300,000 votes. 650 plays 350. That's the broad shape of it, I see. And also that is another factor which applied in 2018. If it's felt that it's not close, that is actually another disincentive to go vote. My vote doesn't make a difference if there's 250,000 between them. So I think everyone feels that those who are going to vote, they're voting for the least worst option. And but I think that doesn't take, and so people will say, okay, so she won with, we'll just say 700,000 votes. And they'll do the maths, 700 out of a technical 3.6 that could have voted, she got less than 1 in 4 of people who could have voted for Catherine Connolly.
Yeah, but I think you have to, in fairness, you do it on the basis of who voted.
And so what I want to say is, first of all, as we're talking almost the past tense, I think that Catherine Connolly is a deserving winner. I think she's a legitimate winner, notwithstanding all of what we've said, and I think she should be accorded the respect of everybody when duly elected.
Okay, well, I'm going to suggest something else to you, right? And I'm sure you will immediately reject this, and I'm sure most people listening will reject it as well. But I'm going to make a suggestion that I think at this stage we're almost come to it where we would be better off if we didn't have a presidential election, that we still have a presidency, but that we didn't have a presidential election, because the quality and standard of the candidates is in serious decline, for the very reason that I've spoken to a number of people who would have been mentioned as potential presidential candidates. 2 in particular, I think, would have been very, very good candidates, but who were unwilling to get involved because of the...
Can you name them?
No, I won't, in fairness to them. But the relentless focus on even small elements that might have happened in their life getting blown out of all proportion, right? It's funny, we have a subscription edition, which we already recorded earlier this morning with Terry Prone, and she said in relation to one person about how you don't judge that person perhaps on the worst moment of their life or the worst public moment of their life.
Or TV moment, yeah.
Yep. And, so we'd maybe say in relation to the way things go, if you become a candidate for the presidency, all of the worst things about you can be dredged up and can be thrown at you, and some of the stuff becomes a little bit ridiculous. So there are people then who say, well, what the hell would the alternative be? And I have an alternative to offer, right? And this, I'm a firm believer in the need to vote in your general election, your local election, European elections. I'm not in any way dismissing the importance of a vote.
And you're mindful of the principle of democracy.
I am. But what I would suggest is, given the nature of the role of president, given that it essentially is a legal function, I would suggest that the Chief Justice from the Supreme Court should be automatically, as part of taking the job as the Chief Justice, should be promoted to the role of president every 7 years. Right? You're looking at me absolutely
physically
aghast.
ill.
Good. I'm glad I can make you
Did you see the Chief Justice's recent comment?
About what?
About judicial reviews and all of that kind of stuff, and it was just unbelievable. So it was, sorry, I was wrong. It was about personal injury awards. So the Judicial Council recommended a 16% increase. Yeah. The government back in July said, no, we're not going to do that. We've 4 times the EU and average for whiplash and for the UK. And he said this was a wrong decision. And I felt, what planet are you on? Of all the people you could have picked, I thought you were going to say have a free vote of the members of both houses of the Oireachtas or something else, or whatever way of elected people. But to suggest the Chief Justice, Matt, you lost the room.
Well, we'll see what our listeners think and what they think, because I mean, a lot of people would be hard pressed to identify who the Chief Justice is. Donald O'Donnell, Belfast man, is in his late 60s now, who's regarded as a brilliant barrister, appointed to the Supreme Court in 2010, Chief Justice in October 2021. But the point is,
of all the rabbit holes you could go down, that's your worst. In the history of Path to Power, that is your worst. Carry on.
Anyway, just because you didn't think of it. Anyway, the point being, you have a legal expert, and also somebody coming from that legal background would know how to stay between the guardrails. And it doesn't mean that somebody who is a member of the Supreme Court is necessarily dry and dull. There have been some great characters who've made their way to the Supreme Court as well. But having a sense of knowing what the role is, and also they wouldn't say anything, I think, that would let us down, right? Mm. And I think that's... But
the whole thing is embodying the spirit of the nation, societal representation, a voice, and all of that stuff. Like, why would you go to a former barrister, judge who's in...
So former barrister is just becoming our president, albeit one who hadn't moved her way up through the ranks.
And who won't reveal her clients. But anyway, so let's take a bit of a dive into what won it.
Do we want to talk about Catherine Connolly first?
Yes, I do.
Before we get to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, let's talk a little bit about Catherine Connolly and how she won and what she represents and what she will be as president, because I did push her on this when she came in for interview the other day about, you know, all her beliefs and all the rest of it. Is she going to leave those at the door? Because she now has a role as president which has these guardrails, which means she can't go beyond them.
Yeah, would you believe it? I was taking my walk at 5 o'clock on Monday and I was listening to the interview, and thankfully after about 12 minutes I got an important phone call and I was listening to it on my phone, and then the call was over and I listened to the point where you were asking about Ursula Ní Shannon.
The Irish woman.
Okay. And...
when she just wouldn't answer my question.
Can I say this? Yeah. I was furious with you insofar as that on that issue and on that point, and I didn't know that, you did press her. And the question you repeatedly asked her was, did you have a conversation with her? What did you say? Implying she was either naive or concealing the fact. Well, tell us about the the court case and all, and what were you doing and so on. And that question had been asked of her previously. And this particular interview is coming quite late in the whole debate. So we kind of knew her, you know. What you allowed was, in the I would say, and everyone else allowed was, a particular skill where she always reframed your question into her question. She'd say, the question here is about rehabilitation, or the question is about this woman's now or privacy. Sorry, you were entitled to say, sorry, Catherine, I decide what questions get asked here, not you. You frame every question. I didn't ask you about her current life. I didn't ask you how suitable she was for this job. I asked you a specific question. And either we're going to proceed on the basis that you answer the questions that I decide as editor of this programme are appropriate, or you decide to reframe every question. It's unacceptable. You've done it for 3 months and I'm not tolerating it. And you could have I could have got you on the 9 o'clock news.
Well, except I did it differently in that I listened to her. And I went back and I asked the question again, and I went back and I asked the question. I think I've asked it 3 or 4 times. And I think the listeners were able to discern from that was that she didn't answer the question and wasn't able to answer the question.
Or wasn't going to.
Wasn't going to. But, I mean, it does strike me that...
And that's a skill, let's be clear.
Look, but if you were let's just take it a little bit out to the side. If you were hiring somebody... and you were aware that that person had a criminal conviction, and of the type of criminal conviction there was, would you fall back and saying, well, I got a recommendation from Eamon O'Queeve, who said she was a great woman. I think if you're taking somebody into a position like that, you would have actually sit down and have a conversation.
An interview.
What did you do?
I
mean, you go to... And the implication of what Catherine Connolly said was that she never had that conversation.
Or if she wasn't going to reveal it to you, which was not reasonable. No, I actually felt your line of questioning was, but like someone had to say, Who decides who asks the question here?
Well, the other thing that came up, which I think has been a bit ridiculous as well, was this idea that she had no option but to represent the
credit institutions,
in relation to a repossession case. And again, I'm going like, hang on a second. My understanding of the cab rank rule is that applies in criminal cases. So that if somebody is accused of murder or assault or any things like that in criminal goes into the criminal courts, that they get the best representation available. And that's why barristers get up and argue on behalf of people who subsequently are found to be guilty, but they have to have the opportunity. The commercial and civil thing, it works differently. It works differently.
And you can pick, I'm going to do this panel of family law, of criminal law, or conveyancing, whatever it is. And you have experts in like the truth is you do have some selection. And you can also say, would you believe it, I have so many cases on hand. Like, do you think if Paul Gallagher or Martin Hayden get a brief, they have to take every...
No, and in fact, they negotiate a very big fee. And if you're not paying a very big fee, you don't actually get paid. But it goes beyond that. And the question I asked her, which she said, oh, you'll have to ask them that. Well, no, because you're the one who's running for president, is what made the solicitor think that she would be a good person to argue their case to have a repossession?
No, all that is... But sorry...
And there's a string of things.
But in fairness,
like that.
it is a skill. And can I say just one tactical error that I think Fine Gael made? I had actually mentioned to you, I rang someone in Galway and I said, what has she done in the last... Because she's on the council since about 2006 or that. And they said, actually... Thanks to her, there's no bypass. And I actually got an email from someone who lives in a particular side of Galway and says that they have an hour and a half commuting because there's no bypass and that it's all very well for her. She's on a bike and it doesn't matter to her, but our quality of life was really... It was quite a young person and they were really angry about this. Fine Gael, and in the debate on Tuesday night, you'd think, is this the appropriate person we want for president who's a serial objector, not only to that, to educational facilities, sports facilities and so on, she's actually made her reputation on this in Galway. And sorry, it's a perspective, a naysayer, but like the fact of the matter is that someone we want to the bar. Fine Gael didn't even go there at all. And like, because everything was a repeat on Tuesday night, you'd think they'd be looking for new material. So
was the Fine Gael campaign one of the worst ever run in the history of elections?
Well, now that it's over, I think we need to call out something. And I have to be honest about this because the nature of this is that on the stump, on the street, Heather Humphreys' endearing quality is that she's a good people person. Met her herself at the ploughing. She put her arms around you. I hadn't met her really ever before. I've interviewed her as minister on radio.
I presume when she met you at the ploughing and put her arms around you was before you blundered into the smear comment.
Would you believe it? Some of the lefties text me, I hear she's putting me on the council estate. But anyway, I said, well, that's the least she could do. So I said, so anyway, that's all fun and games. But the point about it is this. The truth of this campaign is, I know loads of people who would normally be disposed in this stark contrast between a left-wing person with proven credentials and a Fine Gael woman who is pro-establishment. They would be ideal fodder, women, mature women who play bridge and so on. And so I'd say to them, I'd say, who are you voting for? And they say, well, actually, they looked at Heather and they engaged with Heather and said, you know what? One of the requirements of a president is to be fairly articulate, not necessarily in your views, and that leaving aside the fact that she wasn't fluent in terms of all the memes about the stuttering and the muttering while she was thinking, that, she had a few stock phrases like step up to the plate, but even her defence of fox hunting was kind of really gauche. And to be honest with you, she proved herself to be simply too inarticulate to be president. And that's why a lot of people who are going to vote for her decided to either stay at home or not vote for her, whereas Catherine Connolly was articulate.
Okay, so I would sum it up in this regard is that we were left with a choice between somebody, and you'd be worried about what she might say, and the other one, how she might say it.
Correct.
Okay, and
that is a fair summary.
Right? And that, that's it. Does this mean that this person, you can trust them to represent you without letting you down? One might let you down by what she says and some crazy stuff about Germany rearming and that stuff, and some strange views in relation to the military-industrial complex, which a lot of apparently a lot of countries in the European Union are getting seriously pissed off with Ireland's holier-than-thou approach in relation to that when they see the threat coming from Russia. And then you have the problem of the person who you feel is, God, she let you down because she's so inarticulate and expressing and the rest of it. However, and this comes to why we have to talk about Fine Gael's
So can I just say one thing about the Connolly campaign? I was speaking to some of the people who were involved and I said, if you go back to July and the period between May and July when Francis Black and a unity candidate were out there and Labour were looking at different people. You remember the guy from the WHO and different names were mentioned. Yeah, all those kind of thing. That in fairness, the Soc Dems were the first in to commit, and I will give them the most credit of all the left-wing parties. I think other sort of Johnny and Joanne come-latelys will take all the credit and shout loudest over the weekend. Yeah, but the person those who are on the inner sanctum say, and I've never met this woman, there's a Beaveen O'Connor, who became her parliamentary assistant in 2016 when she was first elected, was the mastermind behind her, who actually controlled the whole campaign rather than any left-wing party. And you know the way Breed Rosny was for Mayor? Yes. This is actually the person who the media need to shine a light on, because she deserves the biggest single credit of anyone other than Catherine herself for this success.
But let's talk a bit about Fine Gael's decision to select Heather Humphreys. And there's a few things here. First of all, okay, they got caught in the hop when Mairead McGuinness, who was their preferred candidate, for health reasons, decided to step back suddenly in August, catching everyone on the hop. But instead of taking their time to work out what to do, Fine Gael rushed into giving Heather Humphreys the nod. Even though Sean Kelly had previously expressed his interest, the MEP, suddenly party headquarters, the party leadership, the parliamentary party all suddenly rushed to endorse Heather Humphreys. And I'm not been wise after the event here. At the time, and friends of mine, particularly working in media, and my own radio programme, we were all going, what are they at? Because I can tell you that over the last decade, if ministers were being made available to us for radio interview, the very last person from Fine Gael that we would have wanted on air was Heather Humphreys. Because if you go back to the time of her initial appointment as a minister, and you remember that she made a complete hames of the appointment of a Fine Gael person to the Museum of Modern Art.
To get a Senate nomination.
Yeah, and made a complete hames of way of actually answering the questions in relation to this. And whenever there were occasions when we would have had to have her on because there would have been major policy initiatives which were of considerable interest to our listeners in relation to social welfare payments or whatever. It was just like having somebody who was reading off a script as if they had something. She never came into the studio, to the best of my knowledge. Even this week, when I interviewed her, and belatedly, Fine Gael agreed to make her available to The Last Word, to our 180,000 listeners, and to the extended Today FM network, because it would be podcast. She wasn't in studio. And I was thinking to myself about this. They knew her schedule last week. And then they only on Wednesday morning said you could have her for 15 minutes on the phone Wednesday evening. I think probably so that they couldn't be said that she hadn't been available. And I thought, how stupid an approach is that to take? Just how dumb a campaign is it? Are you afraid to put Heather Humphreys into a studio? And then I realised she's never been in the Today FM studio. I've never met Heather Humphreys. I've interviewed her loads of times on the radio when we decided we had to interview her. But anyway, the point he'll come back to, when she became the nominee, we were going, why? Are Fine Gael in such a bubble that somebody who they see in private, who they feel gets on well, did they have no knowledge about how poor a media performer she was? Did they think that she would somehow be transformed? And also I mean, as I'm talking here, I'm thinking of more things in relation to her. You highlighted at the very start of her campaign here in Pat de Par her resignation statement last year. And that statement...
24th of October last year. Very lately. Because you see, she still held on to a ministry. She could have stepped out in July, say, I'm not standing the next election, let another minister step up. And, like she basically said she was exhausted.
She did. She said she was exhausted. She didn't have the stomach for the fight anymore. She had done it all. And we were supposed to think that suddenly that when she re-emerged, that she'd been re-energised, that she was a new person. Or is it that they thought that, well, it's really a job up in the park that is an easy one to do. It's a semi-retirement gig.
So while spending quite a lot of time last week explaining that I'm no act-hander part in the Fine Gael campaign, I still am on talking terms to some Fine Gael people.
They're still talking to you even after that?
Yeah. And
secretly though, they never admit to it.
So let me tell you some of the things they told me. When I asked the question, what about Sean Kelly not getting any TDs to have enough to even fight a contest in the parliamentary party, they said, Ivan, would you ever go check who, if an MEP it is no longer an MEP, in other words, elected president, they have a substitute system. And they said, would you ever go check who the number one substitute is? And they said, you'll find it's Senator Martin Conway from Clare.
Oh.
So Martin Conway was in a very difficult personal space whereby he was found by the Gardaí in Dublin city centre and he had passed out. And basically it was a kind of health story insofar as he was stepping back and he was sort of taken away from the party, a whip. So basically the situation is as this is unthinkable, that if Kelly wins, Conway will become an MEP. And that was the number one reason why he was not selected. Okay, the next thing they said, I said, how is Harris fixed after this? And they say, actually, he's all right. He's not taking the rap for this simply because he's taking the rap for other things, but in terms of the unpopularity of the party and different things. But he was not. He was really the prime mover behind Mairead McGuinness, less so for Heather. But the number of influential Fine Gael people have actually listed to me that one of the mistakes they say Harris has made is that he did not, when taking over from Leo, do a purge of the Fine Gael head office. And basically what they're saying there is specifically, and these people are named.
Can we name names?
We'll put it like this. So the General Secretary is John Carroll.
Yeah.
The Director of Research and Strategy is Terry Murphy, who was actually there in my time as a personal friend of mine and often is one of my sources, right? So but the point is this, he's there a very long time. And then they have a solicitor for the office and essentially they're saying there needs to be a complete clear out, and that should extend to the press office to have a proper social media function. Going forward, the lesson of this is Fine Gael were not at the races when it came to social media.
Is there also another thing that they did which was a major blunder, and again was pointed out at the time, was that when it became known that Simon Harris had given an instruction to the various councils not to allow them to vote for other candidates to come onto the ballot paper. And a straightforward version of events, you can say, well, that makes sense. Why should they be seen to allow somebody else onto the ballot paper who could take votes away from their candidate? However, that backfired, didn't it? In two ways. One, it became a major issue that a lot of people were able to say, oh, you're denying us choice. But the second thing was that it actually exposed Heather Humphreys more.
It did. If there was 5 on the debate, you wouldn't notice on a 1-to-1. There was no hiding place.
She could have hidden in plain sight, and there was no hiding place. Okay, it became 2 unexpectedly, but even in 3, it's harder to hide. They needed other people to be there. Look, we need to take a break. We need to come back and we want to talk about more about
the fallout of this.
Particularly with Fianna Fáil as well, because let's not forget the Jim Gavin situation. And also, I was very remiss at the start. I forgot to congratulate Ivan on collecting his free bus pass yesterday.
Yes.
So we will get to that when we come back after this.
This episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm. Greenman Open focuses on investing in grocery-anchored retail real estate, designed to generate stable, long-term income. This fund is managed in Ireland. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.com.
Now, before making any investment, it's important to understand the risks. Investments could go up or down, and past performance is not a reliable guide to future results. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but like all investments, it carries risks. You should always seek advice from a financial professional before investing. Welcome back to Path to Power. And birthday boy, at least birthday boy on Thursday. the age of 66. Congratulations.
And this is why I'm going to be taking a step back from my commitments going forward, because I am an old age pensioner. That, would you believe it, you like this. So it's a free travel pass. I use public transport a lot. The Lewis train service all the time, buses and so on. I can stand up on some of those things. So it came in the post on Monday or Tuesday, and FT plus S, I assume that's plus Deirdre. But basically, the story is, yesterday, so I had a meeting in town.
I'm showing the photograph for those who are watching on YouTube.
It looks like something at a crime call.
Well, no, it actually looks more like Uncle Fester. But there you go.
I don't know who Uncle Fester is. But the point about it is this, that I was getting on the dart because I was staying in town for the last 3 nights, and I said, now here goes. Yeah. And I did the ping. And hey presto, the gates opened, and I said, I'm set for life now anyway. So basically, thank you very much, Department of Social Protection in College Road in Sligo. They're looking after me only fantastically. I didn't get the free fuel, but I got sorted on everything else. Now, I want to talk seriously for a moment, because...
Have we done Fine Gael? There's nothing
more that I have to say on Fine Gael. Right. And put it like this. Catherine Connolly as president, congratulations, all the rest of it, coronation, all the rest of it. Look, where will the flashpoint come? I actually don't think it'll come on legislation, triple lock or anything like that. I actually think it might come, the government have to approve any foreign travel. So first of all, I'll be looking to see who's on the Council of State. She has 7 nominees in that. Will there be any Sinn Féin representation, and who will they be? But secondly, if she says, I want to go to Gaza. Gaza was her big ticket item. I want to go to Palestine. Will the government say yes or no? That is a good question. Because if the government said no, or to go to the States or whatever, will there be a row about that? And what will be the public perception of that? What would you say about that?
I would have thought that...
Or even to go to the States.
Yeah, well, I think there would be, in relation to Gaza, I think that there would be security issues that no other heads of state are able to go and be made to go safely, so she wouldn't be able to go, would she?
Okay, but can you see how it might be an area of conflict? She wants to be an independent voice, independent mind. That would be one way whereby the rubber might meet the road.
Maybe she go to Venezuela. Maybe she go to support Maduro, given that Mick Wallace and Claire Daly said they were free and fair elections there. Maybe to go and offer, but of course the important thing to do there is not to go out in a boat, because if you go out in a boat you could get blown up by Donald Trump.
Well, good luck to her anyway, and I wish her well in her term, and her husband. Henry, is it Henry? It's Brian McHenry.
Isn't it extraordinary how the spouses have both managed to stay out?
That's right. No, and that would be Beavin's handiwork, I'm told, control. Now, we talked about Fine Gael. I'm thinking no seismic change there, but there certainly will be a review of headquarters, simply because you have to have someone to throw into the bus, and it wasn't done before. And in fact, Alwyn Enright did most of the good stuff in the general election with selection conventions and so on, and was sort of sent packing after. Maybe she wanted to after
Actually,
the election.
There's one other Fine Gael thing I just thought of, is that. So I read one piece, I think it was Gary Murphy wrote about how Simon Harris seems to have lost his mojo a little bit, particularly since the incident in Kanturk during the general election campaign.
And the threats subsequently, the Mullingar time, yeah.
I think actually, and I don't disagree with what Gary said, I think he's an excellent analyst, but I do think there's an additional thing that may be affecting Simon Harris a bit, is the personal threats that have been made against his family, which are absolutely disgraceful. But I think has created this whole thing about the need for security around his family, which can't be good when he's got small children, and when also the extended family at times have been dragged in by these knuckle draggers, who are
currently before the courts, some of them.
Yeah. So okay. I think this is, and I would have, whatever you might think of his political performance, I think the way he's been treated by some people personally and his family has been disgraceful, and it must impact on his enthusiasm for what he's doing.
Yeah, and I've noted that, and it's a human thing. Okay, I want to just give me a few minutes on Fianna Fáil, because I've been speaking to some of them. So first of all, the pivotal moment of this election, leaving aside Maria Steen, leaving aside Bejesus, leaving aside everything, the 5th of October, when Jim Gavin withdrew, was the pivotal moment when basically the Red Sea parted for Catherine Connolly to win. So there is seething anger, disillusionment, embarrassment, by Fianna Fáil rank and file people and their best supporters in relation to this whole episode.
Sorry, I just want to say, I'm going to be fascinated to see how many votes Jim Gavin gets, right? At this stage, as people are listening, they might have a fair idea. I mean, I wonder how many votes.
I think he'll get about 100,000 plus.
Yeah, will he get to 12.5%?
No, he won't.
Right.
He won't.
Because the reason I'm bringing it up is that I think there may be a significant amount of people who will vote Jim Gavin just as a protest against, and I know people who are doing that.
Yeah.
I think there's a significant number of Fianna Fáil people who will vote for him anyway because they will vote Fianna Fáil.
Yeah.
And there may be some Fianna Fáil people who will vote for him because they hope they can get to the 12.5% to get the money.
Well, we know someone else told me,
back.
if the 250 grand is the amount they could recoup, that it would be immoral. A lot of people say they couldn't take it, insofar as it's like the proceeds of crime. Like, I was shocked about
that's
this.
A bit
No,
extreme.
but that view is expressed to me by a Fianna Fáiler that it would be the ultimate embarrassment to take it if they got. So they prefer if it didn't arise.
That's actually a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. The thing is that it would be made the opposition parties would
the stigma. Yeah.
The stigma. Oh, you dropped your man. He couldn't because of this. Blah blah blah.
And now you're carpeting the money. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's a good point.
Okay. So anyway. What I want to say is this, that all this resentment and anger and disillusionment is presenting something very, very important as the fallout for this. So we've discussed the Catherine Connolly and what she'd be like as president, how it'll impact with the government and so on. I am predicting now between November and January, there is a particular period of peril for Micheál Martin. If he gets into February, look, we'll be in the run-up to the presidency and so on. So I think that there's a particular window here. And I want to give him the bad news. The bad news is that there are people who have made up their minds to take him out. And they have looked at the rule book, and the rule book is for a motion of no confidence, it's only amongst TDs. So that's 48. And so therefore the magic figure is 25. In the first instance, to table a motion of no confidence in him, you need 12 TDs to sign it. So I've spoken to people to say that we can get the 12. They actually believe, and they are supporting Jim O'Callaghan. There is a real prospect, they believe, that of the 48, he will get 30. And he can win and he can be Taoiseach by Christmas. They actually believe this. In fact, one of the reluctant players in this is probably Jim himself, because they say he's too much of a gentleman and so on. But if you look at his profile in the last 7 days, and where he wouldn't say how he was going to vote himself, I thought, Jesus, there's a lot of leadership there anyway. So the point is this, whereas I hear some people are saying, how did it, this committee of inquiry, and you have Tom Braz...
Which is due to report back by about the 12th of November, isn't it?
I heard the boss might like to roll that into Christmas, just to delay it. And there's a row about that. But others are saying to do it early. So basically, who spoke to who first? And the word I'm kind of hearing is that Interstate left, that a lot of the conversations may have been with Jack Chambers. And that he is the guy who's really been thrown under the bus here in terms of future. Like, there's no messing about that. He is in the crosshairs of this. They're out to get him.
Jim Gavin came from Jack Chambers' neck of the woods.
Right.
Basically, Jack Chambers would have been the person who would have known Jim Gavin the best within the senior Fianna Fáil leadership.
So basically, I think that there's an X on his back in relation to that potential report. Now, so... if something happened, like what happened this week, of Fianna Fáil being state of the parties, 17%. Now, there were 2 polls done during the week, one by Red C, one by Ireland Thing, which just gave the presidential piece of it, right? All good for Connolly and so on. On Sunday, we may have, over Saturday, Sunday, a state of the parties. If it transpires that Fianna Fáil are on 17%, and back to the levels of 2011, there may be a circumstance that, or if there's a by-election in Galway, a circumstance that will cause a crisis. And what I'm saying is between November and January, these people are opportunistically minded to wait for the best opportunity to pull that lever. The other thing
you just reminded me of something. A by-election for Galway West, right? I mean, who was the Fianna Fáil candidate?
Gráinne Seoige.
Exactly, who won't be the candidate again.
No.
But that would...
Sean Kine would have a good chance of winning that.
Hold on. Sean Kine been Fine Gael. Yeah. But that would bring up again another black mark for Micheál Martin when people will suddenly say, well, who's our candidate going to be for the by-election? Oh, do you remember the mess we made with Gráin Yasholga? That's not going to go down well.
Well, in fairness, John Connolly got the seat for Fianna Fáil and there wasn't a second seat there for Fianna Fáil.
But still, the whole thing of celebrity candidates.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, is that the whole thing about Micheál's interest in celebrity candidates. And
The other interesting thing I heard, so leaving aside, the big zeitgeist at the moment, I don't know if you saw John McGuinness, what do you call your page, your photo that you put on your social media page?
The profile pic.
Yeah, profile pic. Who's on his, go Google John McGuinness. It's Catherine Connolly.
Really?
Yeah, it's just in the last few days. 3 people sent it to me. I take a look at this, Ivan, from Sock Thames to Fianna Fáil are saying, look at this. So his profile pic, as you call it, is John McGuinness. So, Dara, there was Wednesday night, is always the night, the social night in the Dáil or whatever. Basically, I'm told that Dara O'Brien got a flea in his ear from people for being photographed with Heather. Any chance you had of being leader has just imploded with that. So, whereas if you take the juxtapose with the McGuinness thing, there is a real anti-Heather, anti-pro-FG thing, and that's why Jim O'Callaghan said he wouldn't say how he's going to vote. If he votes 1 Jim, will he vote 2 for Heather or for Catherine Connolly? He was reserving his options on that. The other thing I heard, you'd never guess who's on manoeuvres. So Jack is a busted flush. Dara O'Brien is a busted flush. Likeable but a spoofer after the housing thing. Dara Calleary is on manoeuvres, I'm told.
Dara Calleary would be a man who wouldn't have a great love for Micheál Martin, would he? Because
he was deputy leader. He was axed during COVID. He was eventually he was given chief whip's job when they first went into government, which was when he was part of the negotiating committee with the Fine Gael and so on. So basically, and then he wasn't a wet day in agriculture, and then he was sacked over the Clifton House Hotel. So basically, has rehabilitated himself, and I would have always said that the Dara, very experienced, very safe pair of hands. And the scenario that's unfolding is that he's putting out feelers and people on his behalf that would he be a suitable candidate, right? And then what they were saying is, just say it was 30 plays 18 and that those were the 2 candidates, that actually the dream team would be Jim as leader and Dara's deputy leader. And he'd be restored to his position.
Giving you the urban.
Now, I've moved 10 steps ahead there, but I'm trying to...
You see, I was talking to a couple of Fianna Fáil backbenchers in recent weeks who initially were of a mind, well, look, they do want change, but they were saying, give Micheál Martin until the end of the EU presidency and then make
That's where we were at, January 27. Yeah.
Okay. And that would mean that somebody else in Fianna Fáil would be Taoiseach for the best part of a year before handing over to Fine Gael, and then would have that former Taoiseach moniker in going into the next general election. That's not the way Micheál Martin ever saw things. I mean, I'm convinced that Micheál Martin saw himself continuing to lead Fianna Fáil
into the next election,
right? It's just so hardwired into him that he's not thinking of retirement. I think he will come to regret not having run for the Áras. Well,
contrition isn't going to cut it. He got through the last moment of the parliamentary party, but the 5.5 hour meeting, he got through that. I don't think contrition is going to cut it.
And there just comes a time.
They also say 6 ministers will support a motion of no confidence.
And I think you have got to the stage as well whereby he has been in control of the party for 14 years. He did step up in 2011 when lots of others ran off the pitch. I think there is a gratitude to him in Fianna Fáil for that, but you know better than I do how politicians think. They're thinking of the next election, saving their seats.
And sorry, let's be clear. In 2024, he ended up with 25%, the largest party on the councils, and 25% of Dáil TD's 48. That was a real achievement, having hit a low point in 2020. Yeah. And he had he was in an impregnable position before this in August.
He was. Yeah. I mean, it was just a question of, I think people expected, he was definitely going to fill his term as Taoiseach, and then it was a question of whether anyone else might emerge who would take the crown from him going into the 29 election. But now it very, very firmly looks like that this has done irreparable damage to him. That the decision to back Gavin will turn out to have been the biggest mistake Micheál Martin has made in the last couple of decades.
And the reality is that much as, don't rock the boat, we're in government, there's a lot of things to consider here, the relationship with the regional independents and Fine Gael and all the kind of establishment issues. If 12 people put their name to a motion, the genie's out of the bottle and can't be put back into it. The fissure is there. And people who might now be minded to, support the status quo might say, well, look, we're going to have to face this sooner or later. So there's a gamble involved here. And put it like this, I think the most important fallout of this will not be the left are going to take over the running of the country, because I believe it's 4 years away to the next general election, and it's just too early to predict. Will this left unity last? How fragile is it? Is Paul Murphy really on the same page on every issue as the Green Party and as the Labour Party?
Has Sinn Féin taken leadership of the left?
Oh, and could cannibalise the left.
You will see, but this thing as well, about the unity of the left, but in Catherine Connolly's campaign, I know we disagreed in this last week, but you couldn't say that Sinn Féin has taken leadership of that campaign, could you?
I think they did provide a heft on the ground. When there was a walkabout in Monaghan and different places, they could roll out the big artillery, Micheál O'Neill, they could guarantee a crowd in Limerick and so on. They could actually ensure that the Enoch Burks, there was kind of bouncers there to push them back. And also, let's look at it, the postering campaign of Catherine Connolly was by far the best. That was well resourced. Someone paid for that. And you can rest assured it wasn't crowd-funded, that. You know what I mean?
A large part of it was crowdfunding.
Well, put it like this, I think Sinn Féin's resources did add a lot of heft to the actual logistics of the campaign.
But the point still is, the most recent opinion poll had Sinn Féin at 27%, comfortably ahead of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, who I think his combined figure now is 35%, isn't it?
Historic low.
Historic low. But Sinn Féin has been higher than 27% in the polls previously.
Oh, they were on 35 at one stage, yeah.
So you wonder that, clearly
22-3, yeah.
Clearly
absolutely.
This government now has become very unpopular very quickly. A combination of failure to address the housing issues.
And sorry, that by all accounts, because that is my day job, housing. It is getting worse. It is really, really worrisome. It's really worrisome.
So people know this.
See the HAP figures,
that
there are just no properties to rent.
Yeah, so this is seeping through the consciousness of everybody in the country. And there's this feeling that this government, having been re-elected on a promise of competency,
and executing,
has proven to be incompetent.
Yeah.
And then you have, and we've mentioned it before, we had a budget which gave very little to people, gave nothing to the vast majority of workers, has let them feeling work off.
Well, 80% say, actually calculating factually, they are worse off.
And I've been talking to a number of retailers who are saying that they're very concerned about declining consumer confidence.
Did you notice? Central Bank, Bank of Ireland, Davies, there's been a few economic forecasts and good bodies all saying actually the tariffs aren't too bad and the prospects for 2026 are actually, I was looking at a figure, 11% GDP growth.
But that doesn't transfer to people's living standards, and that's the key thing. I think people get really pissed off when they start hearing economists and they start hearing politicians on the back of these economic reports saying, isn't the economy doing so wonderfully? Hasn't everybody got a job? And everyone's going, but can we afford to pay the bills? And they feed the budget.
But sorry, the point I'm making is the Trump tariff threat at 15% has ameliorated better than economists were concerned about.
Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced.
It's still uncertain.
I think that these things have a long time lag, and I think you've got to take that into consideration. Let's just see how things play out, because I suspect economic growth is not as strong. But anyway, even if it is as strong, the point still remains. If people are feeling worse off financially, and everybody feels a bit worse off, then been told, but the economy's booming and we're creating loads of new jobs, doesn't go down well with them. And you end up then getting an increasing frustration, particularly in relation to the availability of houses to buy and rent.
I want to ask you a question. As someone who's, the anchor tenant in the mainstream media, woke and all this kind of thing, and an editor of a daily programme and all this kind of thing. So I want to ask you a political question, which is this. If you're a Fianna Fáil strategist and you're looking at Jim O'Callaghan and you featured Jennifer's Law and, a register for domestic abuse, you look at the multiple interviews he did about the handling of City West, all in the day job of being Minister for Justice, his rhetoric about deportations, although there's quite a lot of people not deported and so on. Do you think that Fianna Fáil will get a boost if Jim O'Callaghan was Taoiseach by Christmas? Or not?
I don't know. I suspect they would. But the question is, what the various people in Fianna Fáil would have to consider is, every leader gets an immediate boost.
Honeymoon, yeah.
Honeymoon, but does it actually sustain? And will it sustain into elections in 2029? And is he the type of person who would actually be a leader that would be good for the country, good for Fianna Fáil? That's the question they have to ask
themselves. And a D4
themselves.
barrister, is he representative of the aspirant working class of Fianna Fáil, which is the bedrock? But then they tell you, well, you know, he's the son of a Garda sergeant in Kerry and his mother's a teacher
and
from
his
Dublin.
sister is Miriam O'Callaghan,
Yeah.
who has an autobiography coming out next week. And that will get an enormous amount of interest and publicity. I don't think it would do Joe O'Callaghan any harm to be known as Miriam's brother, would it?
I'm due to do a piece in Dublin Castle on a panel, you know, for RT with Miriam. She's based there tomorrow, on the day of the count.
Well, that'll be today now, as many people hear
yes,
it,
yeah, but the point is this.
Friday morning.
I'm very tempted to say, how would you feel about your brother being Taoiseach by Christmas, and to see how she'd respond.
Well, I'd say she'd give you a good clipper on the ear.
Well, she would. Well, everyone gives me a clipper on the ear. She'd join the queue in that regard.
I think that'd be a bit unfair, wouldn't it? That'd be a bit
well, that's
unfair.
my speciality.
Yeah, right. Well, at least she's forewarned now at this stage anyway, you know. I'm looking forward to her book coming out.
There's a very crowded book market at the moment.
It is, I know. I mean, I would hope you...
Tell them about our extra episode this week.
But I hope you would agree that I'm being very generous in talking about all the other great books that people can get
you
out
are,
there.
and put it like this. I haven't read your book, and I look forward to reading it at my leisure. This story whereby there was some unnamed entertainer that Ben had kidnapped.
Yeah.
Are you lawyered up for all this stuff?
Yeah. Oh, look, well, it's because of the lawyers. I mean, that's because the identity of I know who it is. And that person
Tell me.
would not. The last person I would be telling in confidence. I clearly know it is. And funny, I've had more information on it since I even put the story in the book. But basically, the story that Ben told a number of people, it was that because of a personal animus that he had towards this person who had been a friend, and as a threat to him to stop doing something that he was doing, that he had him kidnapped, put in the boot of a car and brought up the Dublin Mountains and had him threatened. And he told people about this. You know, with Ben, you know, some of these things can be utterly
exaggerated,
embellished.
Yeah. And dead guys don't talk.
Exactly. Well, yeah. But given the type of personality that he was, it's not unbelievable. But it would be utterly shocking, given that I'm very sympathetic to Ben in the book about the circumstances of his kidnap.
But not in every circumstance are you sympathetic?
No.
To Ben Dunn. Yeah. And tell me, have you got any response from the Dunn family?
No.
Right. They'll just contact me.
Really? Oh, really? All right.
No.
Why? With more money like Ben gave you, 5,000 quid plus, which is in the book.
Indeed.
In fairness, you answered your questions and explained that at the tribunal.
And it was all spent on the election. But the point I want to make is that Dynasty is a fantastic book. It's Gill Publications.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not. Oh, sorry.
It's Iru, which is part of Bonnier Books.
Okay, but it's a hardback.
You can't say it's fantastic yet when you haven't read it yet, all right?
Sure, I'm just doing my puff PR piece for you, Matt.
We have a terrific piece. We have a terrific piece in the subscription edition. Terry Prone.
Which is our longest ever.
Yeah. And we recorded it before this podcast was recorded, and we enjoyed ourselves enormously with Terry Prone, who has all sorts of stories. It goes back into history. It's mainly the 1980s, bit of the 70s, bit of the 90s, but there's great characters in it. Charlie Haughey, P. Flynn, John O'Connor.
Brings you into the room.
Reynolds.
Brings you into the room with some pivotal historic moments. Yeah.
And there's a good to and fro between Ivan and Terry as well.
Yeah, a little bit of a discordant note. She doesn't take criticism that well.
Whereas you do, because you have to take so much of it.
That's right.
Right, we're going to leave it there. That's it for this edition of Path to Power. We'll be back with normal political coverage next week. So from me, Matt Cooper.
From me, Ivan Yates.
Thank you very much for joining us.